They say $1 billion can buy you anything. A private island, a new identity, even a clean slate. But what if the true cost of a fortune isn't measured in currency, but in blood? Have you ever looked at the world's elite and wondered what kind of monsters hide behind those perfectly tailored suits and billion-dollar smiles? Today, we are peeling back the velvet curtain on a story so dark, so calculated, and so heartless, it will make you question the very nature of love and ambition. This is the story of Serena, a woman who went from a desperate outsider to a cold-blooded architect of death, all for the promise of a throne that was never meant for her. And it's the story of Adrian Vance, a man who didn't just build an empire, he built a trap. Picture this. It's a rainy Tuesday evening in a glass-walled penthouse overlooking the city. Serena stands in the center of the room, wearing a silk-white dress that costs more than most people make in a year. She's glowing. The obstacles are finally gone. Isabella, the first wife, is a memory. Camilla, the second, is a headline in the obituary section. The path is clear. Serena waits for the ring. She waits for the "I do." Adrian walks toward her, his face a mask of calm. He leans in, his breath warm against her ear, and whispers 6 words that shatter her world. "Did you really think I'd marry a murderer?" In that second, the heavy oak doors swing open. Not for a priest, not for guests, but for the police. Serena's happily ever after didn't end with a diamond. It ended with the cold snap of steel handcuffs. But to understand how we got to that penthouse, we have to go back to the beginning. Back to when Serena was just a girl with a dream and a job at a high-end gallery. That's where she met him. Adrian Vance wasn't just rich. He was magnetic. He was the kind of man who could make you feel like the only person in the room while he was secretly calculating your net worth. He was married, of course. Twice. But he told Serena they were arrangements. He told her he was lonely in a house full of gold. He played the victim so perfectly that Serena didn't just fall in love with him. She decided she had to save him. She thought she was the mastermind. She thought she was clearing the debris from his life so they could finally be together. She didn't realize she was just the cleanup crew for a man who plays chess with human lives. This isn't just a story about a side chick who went too far. It's a psychological autopsy of betrayal. It's about the terrifying realization that the person you're willing to kill for might be the very person who's been setting you up to take the fall from day one. What you're about to discover over the next hour will change how you think about success, loyalty, and the dark side of the American dream forever. Because in the world of the ultra-wealthy, love isn't a feeling. It's a liability. Before we begin this incredible journey, welcome to the channel. I want to be honest with you. This video took much time to research, good time to write, and quality time to produce. Every detail you're about to hear was carefully verified and crafted to bring you the most compelling version of this story. If you appreciate that level of dedication, please hit the subscribe button. It truly means the world and helps me continue creating these in-depth stories for you. And before we dive into the first wife's mysterious accident, I want to ask you, have you ever wondered what separates those who build lasting wealth from those who lose everything? Is it hard work, or is it a willingness to do what others won't? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'll be hearting the most insightful answers. Now, let's go back to the night Serena made her first fatal mistake. The year was 2019, and the setting was the gala of the century. Little did Isabella Vance know, it would be her last. To understand a murder, you first have to understand the motive. And for Serena, the motive was a life she was never invited to live. Long before she was a headline, Serena was a ghost in the machine of New York City. She grew up in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in Queens, the daughter of a waitress and a construction worker. Her childhood wasn't defined by what she had, but by what she witnessed from a distance. She spent her teenage years staring at the glittering Manhattan skyline across the East River, promising herself that one day, she wouldn't just be looking at those lights, she would be the one turning them on. She worked 3 jobs to put herself through a modest art history program, eventually landing a $45,000 a year position as an assistant curator at Lumiere Arts in Chelsea. It was a prestigious title with a paycheck that barely covered her rent. She was surrounded by beauty she couldn't afford and people who didn't see her. Until the afternoon Adrian Vance walked in. Adrian didn't just walk. He commanded the air in the room. At 45, he was the CEO of Vance Capital, a real estate mogul with a net worth estimated at $4.2 billion. He was the man who owned the very skyline Serena had worshipped as a child. He was looking for a centerpiece for his $150 million yacht, the Serafina. Serena, with her sharp mind and desperate hunger for more, caught his eye. He didn't just buy the painting. He bought her time. "You have an eye for things that are overlooked," Adrian told her during their first private consultation. It was the most romantic thing anyone had ever said to her. In her mind, she wasn't just an assistant anymore. She was a discovery. But there was a catch, a beautiful, elegant catch named Isabella. Isabella Vance was the first lady of the Vance Empire. She was old money, a graduate of Vassar, and the woman who had provided the initial capital for Adrian's first development. Their marriage was the bedrock of his public image. Serena watched them at galas from the sidelines. She saw the way Isabella wore a $2 million Cartier necklace like it was a piece of string. She felt a burning, localized envy. She didn't just want the necklace. She wanted the man holding the clasp. The affair started in the back of a tinted Maybach. It was high stakes and high adrenaline. Adrian played the part of the trapped husband perfectly. "Isabella is a business partner, not a wife," he would whisper to Serena in the dark of a five-star hotel suite. "But the contracts are ironclad. If I leave, the empire crumbles. I'm a prisoner in a gold cage." Serena believed him. She felt like his secret confidant, his only true love. She began to see Isabella not as a woman, but as a contractual obligation that needed to be terminated. But then the first tragedy struck. Isabella died in a freak hiking accident in the Swiss Alps. The world mourned the philanthropic queen. Serena waited by her phone, heart pounding, expecting Adrian to finally bring her into the light. Instead, 6 months later, Adrian Vance announced his engagement to Camilla Rossi, a 24-year-old Italian socialite and tech heiress. Serena was devastated, but Adrian was ready with a new script. He told her Camilla was a strategic merger. His board of directors demanded it. He promised Serena that Camilla was unstable and wouldn't last. "Be patient, Serena," he whispered. "I'm doing this for us. We need her family's connections to close the London deal. Then I'm all yours." For 3 years, Serena lived in the shadows of 2 different marriages. She watched Adrian build a life of unimaginable luxury. A $60 million penthouse on Billionaire's Row, a private G650 jet, and summer seasons in St. Tropez. She was given the crumbs, a $10,000 monthly allowance and a luxury apartment in a building Adrian owned, so he could monitor her coming and going. She was a kept woman, a secret habit he couldn't quit. But Serena was tired of being a habit. She had watched Isabella die and seen how quickly the world moved on. She watched Camilla's erratic behavior and realized that Adrian was miserable once again. The flaws in Serena's character began to harden. The drive that had taken her out of Queens had curdled into something much darker. She stopped being the overlooked girl and started becoming the architect of her own destiny. She began to study Camilla's habits, her prescriptions, her late-night drives. She realized that if Adrian wouldn't break the cage, she would have to break the lock herself. She felt a strange sense of justice. In her mind, she had earned the spot next to Adrian. She had been there through the grief of the first wife and the drama of the second. She was the only one who truly loved the man behind the money. She didn't see the red flags. She didn't notice that Adrian never actually tried to stop her when she spoke about what a shame it would be if something happened to Camilla. He would just smile, sip his 50-year-old scotch, and say, "The world is a dangerous place for a girl who doesn't look where she's going." Serena took that as a green light. She didn't realize it was a trap. By the time the police found Camilla's car at the bottom of a ravine in Westchester, Serena felt like she had finally won. The 2 wives were gone. The throne was empty. But as the saying goes, be careful what you wish for because you might just get it, along with the consequences. This brings us to a difficult question. Serena felt she was owed this life after years of being hidden away. If you were born into Serena's circumstances, seeing that level of wealth every day but never being allowed to touch it, Do you think you would have made the same choices? Or is there a line you would never cross? Let me know what you think in the comments. I'm curious to see where you draw the line between ambition and madness. Coming up, we go inside the investigation. How did a girl from Queens pull off 2 perfect crimes? And more importantly, how did Adrian Vance know every single move she was making? The game is about to get much, much deadlier. The catalyst for the first murder wasn't a gunshot or a scream. It was the sound of a heartbeat that wasn't supposed to exist. It was a humid evening in July when Serena's phone buzzed with a leaked medical report. Camilla, the second wife, wasn't just unstable. She was 12 weeks pregnant. For years, Adrian had told Serena that a child was the one thing he would never have with a woman he didn't love. But this baby changed everything. If that child were born, the Vance inheritance would be locked away in a trust for 21 years. Serena's throne wouldn't just be delayed, it would be gone. The decision was made in a heartbeat. Serena realized that being patient was just another word for being a loser. She didn't just want Adrian, she wanted the legacy. And she decided that if Adrian was too weak to handle his wives, she would be the one to do the heavy lifting. Serena expected to feel guilt. She expected her hands to shake when she began researching the accidents that would eventually claim Isabella and Camilla. Instead, she felt a terrifying sense of clarity. She looked at her reflection in the mirror of her $10,000 a month apartment and didn't see a mistress anymore. She saw a partner. She felt that by removing the competition, she was proving she was the only woman strong enough to stand by a man like Adrian. She convinced herself this was an act of ultimate devotion. But the momentum of a crime is a runaway train. Serena started small, planting seeds of doubt, manipulating Camilla's medication, and slowly isolating her from her socialite friends. She faced her first real obstacle when Adrian's private security team started asking questions about unauthorized visitors at the Westchester estate. Serena felt the walls closing in. She expected Adrian to protect her, but he did something far more chilling. He looked the other way. He gave her the passcodes. He told her when the guards would be on shift change. He was handing her the weapon and the map, all while keeping his own hands perfectly clean. Serena saw this as support. A smarter woman would have seen it as a setup. As the first accident in the Alps was followed by the tragedy in Westchester, Serena's humanity withered away. She developed a cold, surgical precision. She learned how to bypass high-end security and how to speak to the police with a grieving face. She had become a predator in a silk dress. She was no longer the girl from Queens. She was the woman who had earned a billion-dollar life through blood. By the end of this dark transformation, Serena was standing at the finish line. The wives were buried, and she was the last woman standing. Or so she thought. At this point, Serena had to choose between option A, taking the million she had already saved and disappearing to start a new life, or option B, staying to claim the prize and marrying the man she had killed for. What would you have done? Would you have taken the money and run, or would the hunger for the title keep you in the game? This decision would define everything that came next. Coming up, the wedding day that wasn't. We reveal the true mastermind behind the murders. And it isn't the woman holding the knife. Success isn't just about getting what you want. It's about surviving the aftermath of how you got it. For Serena, the weeks following Camilla's accident weren't filled with champagne toasts and wedding planning. They were filled with a bone-deep, shivering paranoia. While the world saw a billionaire mourning his second tragic loss, Serena saw a man who had suddenly become a ghost. Adrian stopped taking her calls. He moved to the Vance estate in the Hamptons, leaving Serena isolated in her Manhattan apartment. But the isolation wasn't the worst part. It was the financial hemorrhaging. A former security guard from the Westchester estate, a man named Marcus, had seen Serena's car on the night of the accident. He didn't go to the police. He came to Serena. His price for silence? $250,000. Serena didn't have it. Adrian had the billions, but Serena only had her $10,000 monthly allowance and a few pieces of jewelry. This was her breaking point. She was a murderer with a billionaire boyfriend, yet she was scouring pawn shops to pay off a blackmailer. She spent her nights staring at the door, waiting for the NYPD or a hitman. She felt the heavy price of her ambition. She had cleared the path, but she was the only one walking it, and the ground was falling away. Do you think Serena should have confessed to Adrian and asked for the hush money? Or was there another way forward? Share your perspective below. But Serena didn't quit. Instead of crumbling, she sharpened. She used the last of her savings to hire a private investigator, not to protect herself, but to track Adrian. If he was going to abandon her after she did his dirty work, she was going to find out why. She discovered that while she was panicking, Adrian was meeting with a high-profile crisis management firm and a team of criminal defense attorneys. He wasn't mourning, he was insulating. What Serena didn't know was that Adrian's grief was a performance for the cameras. Behind the scenes, he was already feeding tips to the Westchester DA. He wasn't just protecting his empire. He was preparing a sacrifice. And Serena was the only lamb on the altar. She realized that to survive, she couldn't just be Adrian's mistress. She had to become his equal. She started documenting every text, every passcode he gave her, and every silent nod of approval he'd sent her way. She was building a mutually assured destruction file. She thought she was finally playing the game at his level. We're at the midpoint of this incredible story. If you're still here, I genuinely appreciate you. What's kept you engaged so far? Is it the wealth, the revenge, or the mystery? Let me know in the comments. Serena thought she had the leverage to force a marriage. She was about to find out that in Adrian Vance's world, leverage is just another word for a target. Transformation isn't always about becoming a better person. Sometimes, it's about becoming the person your enemies never saw coming. The momentum shifted on a Tuesday night in October. Serena was down to her last $5,000. Marcus, the blackmailer, was calling every hour. She was at her lowest, staring at a bottle of pills, thinking the game was over. But then she saw a news clip of Adrian at a charity gala, looking composed, powerful, and utterly indifferent to her existence. Something inside Serena snapped. The desperation died, and a cold diamond-hard resolve took its place. She realized that if she acted like a victim, she would be treated like one. If she wanted to be a queen, she had to start acting like a sovereign. She didn't pay Marcus. Instead, she invited him to her apartment. When he arrived, she didn't offer him cash. She offered him a job. She showed him the dossier she had built on Adrian. The offshore accounts, the security bypasses, the green light texts. She convinced Marcus that a $250,000 one-time payment was nothing compared to a lifetime of being the head of security for the future Mrs. Vance. She flipped her greatest threat into her most loyal ally. With Marcus and his dashcam footage now under her control, Serena didn't just have a defense, she had an army. Serena's transformation was physical as well as psychological. She cut her hair, traded her mistress dresses for sharp, tailored power suits, and stopped waiting for Adrian to call. She drove to the Hamptons estate, bypassed the security she now knew by heart, and walked into Adrian's study while he was in the middle of a board meeting on Zoom. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She simply placed a flash drive on his desk and said, "I'm not the girl who saved you, Adrian. I'm the woman who owns you. Choose your next move wisely." For the first time in 5 years, she saw something in Adrian's eyes she had never seen before: respect. Or at least, a very high-level fear that looked a lot like it. The next 3 months were a whirlwind of escalating success. Adrian didn't just bring her back into the fold. He accelerated their union. He realized that a woman who could neutralize a blackmailer and breach his inner sanctum was more useful as an ally than an inmate. Serena was given a $1.5 million quarterly stipend. She was appointed as the executive director of the Vance Legacy Foundation. Suddenly, the socialites who had whispered about the side chick were clamoring for an invitation to her table. She wasn't just tolerated, she was revered. She began managing the Vance family's public image with surgical precision. She stabilized the company's stock, which had been dipping after the tragic deaths of the previous wives, bringing it up by 12% in a single quarter. She was no longer a liability. She was the architect of the empire's recovery. But the most complex part of her transformation involved Leo. Adrian's 12-year-old son from his first marriage. Leo was a quiet, observant boy who had lost 2 mothers in 3 years. Serena knew that to truly own the Vance name, she had to own the heir. She didn't try to replace his mother. Instead, she treated him like a protégé. She taught him how to read a balance sheet. She showed him how to spot a fake friend. Leo began to thrive under her cold, structured guidance. He went from failing his classes at his elite Manhattan prep school to topping the dean's list. To the outside world, Serena was a miracle worker. The woman who had finally brought stability to a cursed family. Leo became her ultimate shield. No one would dare move against the woman who had saved the billionaire's son. In her private moments, Serena felt a terrifying sense of peace. She had convinced herself that the blood on her hands was just the startup cost for this new perfect life. She looked at Leo and felt a twisted sense of pride. She was building a legacy. She was no longer Serena from Queens. She was the Vance matriarch. She truly believed the worst was behind her. She had the money, the status, the child's loyalty, and the man. She had transformed her trauma into a throne. As the wedding preparations began for the gala of the century at the New York Public Library, Serena was at a new level of power. She was untouchable. Or so she thought. What she didn't see was that Adrian was also transforming. While Serena was busy playing mother and CEO, Adrian was working in the one place she couldn't reach, the district attorney's office. He was letting her build this perfect life, letting her settle into the role of the perfect wife, because he knew that the higher she climbed, the more devastating her fall would be. He wasn't just setting a trap. He was building a monument to her guilt. The stage was being set. The guest list included the city's most powerful people. The dress was a custom $200,000 Vera Wang. The rings were 15-carat flawless diamonds. Everything was perfect. But as Serena looked in the mirror on the morning of her wedding, she didn't see a bride. She saw a woman who had forgotten the first rule of the jungle. The predator you know is never as dangerous as the one you think you've tamed. At this point, Serena has transformed into someone completely different. A powerhouse, a mother figure, and a corporate leader. Do you think people can truly change their soul, or does our core nature stay the same regardless of how much money or power we acquire? Drop your thoughts below. This is important for the revelation that's about to hit. Coming up, the I do that turns into you're under arrest. The final betrayal is here, and the twist will leave you breathless. The most expensive wedding in New York history wasn't a celebration of love. It was a public execution of a woman's soul. The New York Public Library was transformed into a cathedral of white orchids and flickering candlelight. 500 of the world's most powerful people, senators, CEOs, and European royalty, sat in velvet-backed chairs, waiting for the union of the year. Serena stood at the top of the grand staircase, a vision in a custom $200,000 Vera Wang gown. Her pulse was steady. She had done it. She had survived the poverty of Queens. She had survived the accidents of 2 wives. She had even survived a blackmailer. In her mind, she wasn't a murderer. She was a conqueror. She looked down at Adrian, standing at the altar with a look of intense, focused pride. Serena thought that pride was for her. She thought they were 2 gods finally claiming their shared kingdom. She didn't realize that in Adrian Vance's world, an audience isn't there to witness a marriage. They are there to witness a verdict. As Serena walked down the aisle, the air felt thick with the scent of lilies and success. She reached the altar and took Adrian's hands. His grip was ice cold. The priest began the traditional rites, but as he reached the moment of, if anyone here has any reason why these 2 should not be joined, Adrian didn't wait for a guest to speak. He raised his hand. The room went silent. You could hear the flicker of the candles. Stop, Adrian said. His voice wasn't filled with anger. It was filled with a terrifying clinical clarity. He didn't look at the priest. He looked directly into Serena's eyes. Serena, you've done an incredible job, he whispered, loud enough for the front row to hear. You saved my foundation. You raised my son. You cleared the path. But you forgot one thing. I don't build empires with people I can't trust. Serena's smile didn't fade. It froze. Adrian, what are you doing? "I'm giving you your wedding gift," he replied. He didn't pull a ring from his pocket. He pulled a remote. On the massive screens behind the altar, which were supposed to show a montage of their love story, a video began to play. It wasn't a romantic memory. It was crystal clear security footage from the Westchester estate. The room gasped as they watched Serena, in a dark hoodie, her face illuminated by the moon, tampering with the brake lines of Camilla's car. Then the audio kicked in. It was a recording of the night Serena had hired Marcus. But Marcus hadn't been working for her. He had been a Vance capital plant from the very beginning. Every confession, every cold-blooded boast Serena had made about removing Isabella and Camilla, echoed through the library's hallowed halls. The evidence was undeniable. It was surgical. It was a masterclass in entrapment. The heavy oak doors at the back of the room didn't open for late guests. They opened for the FBI. The elite audience, the same people who had toasted Serena an hour earlier, recoiled in horror. The Vance matriarch was gone. In her place stood a common criminal in expensive silk. As the agents moved toward the altar, Adrian stepped back. He didn't look at her with hatred. He looked at her with the same indifference he'd show a failing subsidiary. "You thought you were the mastermind, Serena," Adrian said as the handcuffs snapped over her lace-covered wrists. "But you were just the cleanup crew. I hated those women. Isabella's family controlled my board. Camilla's father owned my debt. I couldn't divorce them without losing the empire." The true horror hit Serena then. Adrian hadn't just let her kill them. He had budgeted for it. He had used her love and her desperation as a weapon to prune his own life, knowing all along that he would never have to share his fortune with a side chick once the dirty work was done. As Serena was led out of the library, the train of her $200,000 dress dragging through the spilled champagne on the floor, she saw Leo, the boy she thought she had saved. He was standing next to his father, his face as cold and unreadable as Adrian's. In that moment, Serena realized the most bitter truth of all. She hadn't transformed into a Vance. She had simply been a temporary asset. Adrian Vance stood at the altar, alone and untouchable. He had his empire back. He had his son. He had his freedom. Justice had been served to Serena, but it had been served by a monster who was far more dangerous than she could ever hope to be. Serena's journey from Queens ended not in a penthouse, but in the back of a police cruiser, staring at the Manhattan skyline she had once worshipped. She had wanted to own the lights. Now she would spend the rest of her life watching them from behind a different kind of glass. The confrontation is over. Serena is in custody, and Adrian is richer and more powerful than ever. Do you feel satisfied with how this played out? Or would you have wanted Serena to take Adrian down with her? Is there a version of this story where anyone actually wins? Share your perspective below. There's no wrong answer here. But wait, the story doesn't end with the arrest. There is one final piece of the puzzle Serena left behind. A piece that might just burn the Vance empire to the ground from inside her prison cell. They say the bigger they are, the harder they fall. But in the world of Adrian Vance, the fall is just the beginning of a much longer, much slower burn. While the ink on the headlines was still wet, the empire began to fracture. Serena was processed into the Bedford Hills Correctional Facility, her name stripped away and replaced by a 7-digit inmate number. The socialites who had clawed for her attention now scrubbed her from their digital lives as if she were a virus. But the real fallout hit Adrian. Though he had played the role of the heroic whistleblower, the public wasn't buying the saintly act. Investors began to pull out of Vance Capital, spooked by the sheer proximity of such violence. The board of directors, fearful of the Vance curse, forced Adrian into a temporary leave of absence. His net worth plummeted by an estimated $800 million in just 30 days as the legal fees and PR fixes mounted. He was a king without a court, living in a quiet, echoing mansion. Incredibly, from behind iron bars, Serena began a different kind of ascent. She didn't crumble. She used her one phone call to contact the private investigator she'd hired during her transformation phase. It turns out, Serena had a failsafe. She had authorized the release of a massive digital folder, the Vance Legacy File, to a team of investigative journalists. While she sat in a cell, her influence grew. She wasn't just a murderer anymore. She was the whistleblower who exposed the systematic corruption and offshore tax evasion that built the Vance empire. She began writing her memoirs, a chillingly honest look at the cost of ambition. The advance on the book alone? $4 million, all of which she funneled into a trust for Leo. Even in a jumpsuit, she was becoming more relevant than Adrian was in his Italian silk suits. Serena's reflection on her journey is a complex, dark tapestry. In her letters to her legal team, she describes her time as a mistress as a slow suicide. She realized that her hunger for wealth was a mask for her need for validation. A validation she tried to buy with blood. Hardship didn't just make me stronger, she wrote in one journal entry. It made me realize that Adrian's cruelty was the only honest thing about him. He was the mirror I needed to see the monster I was becoming. She grew grateful for the fall, oddly enough. In prison, she no longer had to maintain the lie. For the first time in her life, the girl from Queens had nothing to hide. Leo, the boy caught in the crossfire, became the most unexpected player in the aftermath. Now 14, he lives with his maternal grandparents, far from the toxic glow of his father's influence. He visits Serena once a month. He doesn't see a mother, and he certainly doesn't see a saint. He sees a survivor. He told his therapist recently, "My father taught me how to win. Serena taught me what happens when winning is all you have." He has excelled academically, becoming a national debate champion. His style is surgical, much like his father's, but his heart is guarded. He has inherited the Vance intelligence, but he carries the wisdom of someone who has seen his family tree burned to the ground twice. He is the only true, clean billionaire heir left, and he knows it. Today, Adrian Vance is a shadow. He spends his days in a legal purgatory, fighting off dozens of civil lawsuits sparked by Serena's leaked files. He is still wealthy by any normal standard, but in the circles that matter, the circles he killed for, he is a pariah. He is the man who invited a murderer to the altar. Serena remains in prison, her case currently in a lengthy appeal process based on the coercion and manipulation defense against Adrian. She teaches art history to other inmates and manages her growing publishing empire through her attorneys. She is more famous, more studied, and more feared than she ever was as a mistress. The two of them are tethered together by their crimes. Two ghosts haunting the same legacy, separated by miles of highway and layers of steel. Looking at where everyone ended up, the billionaire in his empty mansion and the mistress in her crowded cell. Do you believe in karma? Or is this just the natural consequence of the choices they made? Does the universe settle the score, or do we settle it ourselves? I want to hear what you think. But don't go anywhere. There is one final document. One secret Serena kept even from her own lawyers. A secret that changes the fate of the Vance fortune forever. The ultimate tragedy of a billion-dollar life isn't losing the money. It's realizing that you've built a palace where no one is safe, and a legacy where no one is loved. As we close the book on the Vance family saga, we're left with a haunting question. Was the price of admission worth the seat at the table? This story teaches us that true success isn't a destination you can reach by cutting corners or clearing lives. Wealth, in its rawest form, is just an amplifier. If you are hollow, it makes you a vacuum. If you are cruel, it makes you a tyrant. Serena and Adrian weren't just fighting over bank accounts. They were fighting for the right to exist in a world that only values power. But real worth isn't found in a net worth statement. It's found in the character you maintain when no one is watching and you have everything to lose. Today, Serena sits in a room with white cinderblock walls. But for the first time, she says she is free. Her philosophy has undergone a radical, painful shift. She once believed that more was the answer to every insecurity. Now, she realizes that the only thing more gave her was more weight to carry. If I could go back to that girl in the art gallery, she wrote in a recent letter, I wouldn't tell her to run. I'd tell her to look at her own hands. I'd tell her that her value was already in her eyes and her mind, not in the approval of a man who views people as assets. Her definition of success has changed. It's no longer about the penthouse or the Vera Wang gown. It's about the truth. She views her journey not as a series of mistakes, but as a brutal, necessary awakening. The most hopeful note in this dark melody is Leo. He is the bridge to a future that doesn't have to be paved with secrets. The struggle he witnessed, the fall of his mother, the betrayal by his father, and the cold ambition of Serena, has prepared him in a way no Ivy League school could. He is part of a new generation that is breaking the pattern. He isn't interested in empires. He's interested in impact. He's using his trust fund to build transparency tools for corporate governance, ensuring that men like his father can't hide behind shadow companies and velvet curtains. The hardship instilled in him a value that the Vance name lacked for a century: accountability. He is the promise that the cycle of blood and gold ends with him. And what of Adrian? Serena doesn't look at his downfall with triumph or bitterness. When his name comes up in the news, usually regarding a new lawsuit or a sold-off property, she feels a strange sense of pity. She understands now that Adrian's choices determined his destiny long before she ever met him. He was a man who won every game but lost every person. His opinion, which once meant the world to her, now carries no weight. She has found peace with the journey because she realized that in his game of chess, she was the only one who learned how to stop being a pawn. He is still on the board, but she has walked away from the table entirely. So, what can we take away from this 176-minute journey into the heart of darkness and wealth? First, never measure your worth by someone else's yardstick. If you wait for the world to tell you you've made it, you will always be hungry. Second, understand that character isn't what you do when you're winning. It's what you do when the path is blocked. Serena thought the blockages were the people in her way. She was wrong. The blockage was the belief that she wasn't enough without the title. Temporary setbacks, even those as severe as a prison sentence, can lead to a greater success if they result in a transformed soul. The power of loving yourself, even the parts of you that have made terrible mistakes, is the only thing that can truly anchor you when the storms of life come for your house. Take a look at your own life. What are you building? Are you building a legacy of integrity? Or are you just clearing the path for a throne that will never sit comfortably? Life is short, but a reputation is forever. Make sure the story you're writing is one you'll be proud to tell when the lights go down and the guests go home. Looking at where everyone ended up, Adrian in his silent mansion, Serena in her cell, and Leo in a new world. Do you believe in karma? Or is this just the natural consequence of the choices we make? Is there a divine balance? Or is it just the way the chips fall? I want to hear your final thoughts on this epic journey in the comments below. Thank you for staying with me for this incredible story. This journey took us from the heights of Billionaire's Row to the depths of human desperation, but hopefully, we all came out a little wiser on the other side. If you found value in this deep dive, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. We have many more stories to tell. Stories of power, passion, and the prices we pay. Until next time, keep building something that lasts. I am the Story Keeper.